I'm live. Good evening and welcome to Act One, a Canadian take on news events. As always, I'm your host, Scorty Canuck. I've also got Max, the Wonder Dog, sitting here nicely, quietly by my side. He doesn't jump up on me the way Candy used to. Yeah, I miss Candy. For those who've been around a while, they'll know there's Max. He sees this, he wants his treat. All right, sit down. Sit. Sit, sit. Okay, there's a good shake. Good. Lay down. Sit, sit. Good. Shake a paw. Lay down. Lay down. Speak. Can you speak? He hasn't learned speak yet. Okay, come and get. There we go. Max is a happy dog. We were out for a walk today. Uh, Danny is wishing Max a good evening. Today is Wednesday, the 7th of January. Looking in the corner of my computer, just making sure. And it's 10:18. The coffee was a little hot, but good to have everyone showing up. I hope that the chat will be lively tonight. If it is, I'll probably go a bit longer. What do you want? What do you want? You liquor? Yay. Max is a cool dog, very incredibly affectionate, and also very playful, uh, and very much a tonic in today's crazy upside down world, which is what I was planning to talk about tonight. Um, I haven't been doing my lives as regularly as I used to. Uh, Health issues, super flu, was sick there for a while. All right, go lay down. Go lay down, or go see your brother. Go lay down. Good boy. Now I wanted to talk about. I haven't talked at all yet. I might have touched on it, but I haven't talked about the situation in Venezuela and what's going on there. I learned a few things that I found curious. One of the things that I learned was that during Trump's first administration, so from 2016 to 2020, a bounty had been placed on Maduro to bring him to justice. And the bounty was, I believe, at $15 million. And then, of course, Biden came into power in 2020. And the Biden administration actually increased the bounty from 15 up to 25 million, not billion, 25 million. And then Biden is on record as having commented that Trump was never serious about trying to overthrow someone like Maduro. That Biden said that Trump actually liked dealing with dictators. He had a good rapport with dictators. Whereas, not me, not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is going to be tough on dictators. And then, of course, Trump came back into office in 2024, and the bounty was then increased yet again from 25 to now $50 million, which apparently is not going to be paid. No one is going to be collecting on it. But it just strikes me, the level of duplicity from both sides of the aisle. All the sides talk tough, and yet now you have some on the left who are bemoaning the fact that Maduro has been overthrown, that he's in U.S. custody. Um, and it's not, Canada's own Mark Carney is doing his famous, what I like to call sucking and blowing at the same time. He's happy that Maduro has been removed from power. He's happy for the Venezuelan people to be, they're no longer living under the thumb of a brutal dictatorship. But on the other hand, he doesn't like who did it. He doesn't like the fact that it was done by the Trump administration, and it should have been handled differently. And my attitude on that is, everyone seems to be very happy, engaging in simple rhetoric, but no one wants to take any action. Uh, I'm not sure what Danny has written. Please pray, praying hands emoji, and then a couple of weird emojis that I'm not sure exactly what they mean. And oh, okay. Before that, he had wrote, "Could Trump come get Carney? Ha ha ha! Please." But he's only joshing. There are a lot of interesting things happening in the world, and that's what I wanted this video to be about, over the fact that we're at something, and we have been for a while, at something of an inflection point. And it's just a matter, there are sparks flying all over the place. And it's just a question of when one of these sparks will ignite and lead to something major blowing up. And this inflection point that we're at right now is primarily, in my eyes, it is between China and the United States, each seeking to be the dominant world player. And the Chinese have been engaging, in my opinion, in something of a game. The word would be subterfuge. They've been undermining Western democracies like Canada, like the United States, like Western Europe. I'm sure they have their agents in place. I'm sure they have their real politic games going on, compromising individuals in any manner of ways, or outright bribing, whatever the case may be, and basically creating a situation where in nation states like Canada and the US, you have a House very much divided, where you have people working at counter purposes, where you have the political framework of the United States of Canada, where you have a battle going on between right and left. And so you're so fixated on these little marginal battles within your society that you don't perceive, that you don't recognize the existential external threat. That existential external threat is the Chinese. And they are going to want to be, they have been working towards becoming the dominant world power, and that would be both economically and militarily. Um, and I do believe that Trump recognizes what is happening. You can argue as to whether or not he's confronting it in the best possible fashion, but some do not even recognize the problem. It's something similar, in microcosm. We can look at Venezuela. Everyone is right and left is willing to recognize the problem of Maduro in Venezuela and the issue of Venezuelans having to live under the rule of a brutal dictatorship, but no one seems to want to do anything about it. And then when something is done about it, then what you get is complaints about how it was done. Well, it wasn't done in the right way. It was better to just talk about it endlessly with no action ever being taken. Danny is writing that a real certain type of storm, crap storm, that it's looming here in Canada and abroad, and it is. But what I think we're seeing Trump do is, I think he recognizes the looming battle. And so, in terms of taking over Venezuela, many are making the comment that it was about resources, that it's about Venezuela being having the world's largest proven oil reserves in the world. And now he's saying immediately that the United States is going to be taking 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuela's oil, going to be selling it onto the world market, and that he will be directing how that money is dispensed with, both in terms of for the Venezuelans and how Americans will benefit. And the way I look at it is that oil was likely to end up in the hands of the Chinese and or the Russians. And so Donald Trump has denied them access to a very large oil reserve. And when it comes to global conflict, when it comes to warfare, controlling supply lines, controlling resources is vitally important. That's why in World War II, the Middle Eastern African theater, Rommel, the Desert Fox, why that was such a key battleground is because so much of the world's, at that time, the world's proven oil reserves were in the Middle Eastern region. And so both the Germans, the Nazi led German army, and the Allied armies were fighting it so hard in the Middle East to have control over those vital resources. See what Danny's writing. He's filling it up, and I appreciate it. Um, Danny is saying that it was also about Venezuela being a major shipper of cocaine to the US, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. I actually wonder to what degree that was a motivator and to what degree that was being provided as something of a smokescreen, as an excuse. I do think the real motivation behind taking Maduro out and seizing Venezuelan oil assets is one, to have control over those assets in the United States itself, but also equally to deny that oil to primarily China and China's sphere of influence, which would include Russia. It should always be remembered that China, a number of years ago, 2020, 2021, somewhere in that area, China and Russia signed something referred to as a no limits partnership. What that means is debated. Uh, does that include, is that like a NATO type alliance? An attack on one is an attack on both. There is debate over the degree to which this no limits partnership goes. No limits, usually there are limits. And Monarchy has shown up and is writing, good evening. Has been a while since I caught one of your chats. Good having you back. And anyone else watching right now, I invite you to fill up the live chat. And don't feel constrained by tonight's topic. If there's anything you want to talk about, if there's anything you want to have addressed, discussed, throw it out there and let's have at it. I need to do another one of these on StreamYard so that I can have people come on in open mic fashion and join in. I haven't done that for a while and I need to get back to it. But it's a little more laborious setting up a StreamYard live stream than it is simply on YouTube. YouTube's quick and easy. Don't have to go through that secondary platform, that secondary software. Anyway, we also have Donald Trump again making overtures with respect to Greenland and referring to the necessity that the United States, for vital strategic and national security interests, that the United States of America needs to take control of Greenland. And would that be done diplomatically? Would they purchase it? Would they take it over militarily? Would it be a military conquest? There are all kinds of major implications, especially around how, one, if it takes place, and two, if it does take place, how. If Denmark refuses to cede control of Greenland, which it appears likely that they would ever, it appears highly unlikely that they would ever cede control. So then what does the United States do? Do they militarily take it over? Just come in and say, we're taking it? And it probably wouldn't take much. There are only around 50 to 60,000 native Greenlanders. There are only 50 to 60,000 people living there. The US already has a military base on the northwestern tip of that landmass. And so militarily, Denmark wouldn't be able to stop them. However, NATO, the United States is obviously a NATO country, as is Denmark. And one alliance member seizing the territory of another alliance member, how do things break down? And how does China react? Does China go and do they seize Taiwan? Open question. I've been for a while now, for at least the last couple of years, have been speculating that China, it's simply a matter of when China is going to go in and seize Taiwan. Within the last week or so, they were doing live firing exercises, firing live ammunition around Taiwan, in the seas around Taiwan. So they're definitely rattling their saber. Will it lead to a major escalation? Will it lead to China marching in with the size of the Chinese military? China seizing Taiwan would, I imagine, be as easy as the United States seizing Greenland. However, Greenland is of far greater strategic importance to the United States than Taiwan is to the Chinese, in my estimation. Danny's writing, uh, oh, nope, I'm all caught up. Danny was just saying evening to Anna Monarchy. And fill it up, guys. What do you think? How long is it going to take? I'm beginning to sound like a bit of a broken record. If you go back over the last couple, 2, 3 years, maybe, and talking about the fact that we're moving toward this, but it's very much a slow march. We have war breaking out now in Yemen again, and now it's between uh, the United Arab Emirates and the Saudi Arabians. They're taking on different sides. Previously, a decade long civil war that led to 100,000 plus Yemenis dying, many of them, kids, because of starvation and lack of access to even the most basic medical care. And that war was the result of Iran funding, arming, training the Houthi rebels to overthrow the Saudi Arabian backed Yemeni government. But now you have the United Arab Emirates sticking its nose in. The United Arab Emirates have also been accused of engaging in the Sudanese war, in the war in Sudan. You look at all the conflict zones in the world, and they're all isolated right now. The situation in our hemisphere with Venezuela, there's talk that it could spill over into neighboring Colombia, that it could spill over into Cuba. Uh, Trump has made overtures that this is the U.S. backyard. It's their sphere. It's our region. It's our area of control. And he's harkened back to the Monroe Doctrine about having control over the Western Hemisphere, over South America, North America, Central America, but now they're calling it the Dunroe Doctrine. And I'm not sure exactly where that word Dunroe, aside from the fact that it's a play on the Monroe Doctrine, I don't know where it comes from, where they got this word Dunroe from. But regardless, so we have a conflict that seems to be settled in Venezuela, but with potential for it to spill over into neighboring Colombia, into Cuba, and who knows, perhaps even Trinidad and Tobago. There's talk that they could be in play. So you have hot zones there. We have the hot zone happening, as I just mentioned, in Yemen. You have ongoing conflict in Yemen, in Sudan, in Nigeria, Boko Haram, and the genocidal activities against the Christian community in that country. Then, of course, we have Russia, Ukraine, the Chinese Taiwan situation with live fire exercises taking place, and this slow march toward a global conflict seems to me pretty much inevitable. Uh, and I wonder the degree to which Canadians, a Canadian take on news events, my channel, that's my perspective. I'm a Canadian. And I wonder the degree to which Canadians are prepared for this type of situation. In this nation, Canada, we have never really, war has never really come to our shores. We've never had. The US, the United States was born out of revolution. their Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. But that war had started even a year or so before that date. And so that, there was conflict there then 1860, you had their Civil War, another conflict there. And then in between those two, the closest we've come in Canada to having actual warfare on our soil would be, I guess, the War of 1812. It's not in our DNA, this idea of conflict, not North America wide and certainly not Canada wide. And the U.S. came under attack during World War II with the attack on Pearl Harbor, but that was an outlying state in the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii. It wasn't on the mainland. And I wonder how Canadians would react to finding out that we are living in what it's like right now in Kiev, or in parts of Russia where that war is going on, or in the Middle East, be it in Israel or the Gaza Strip or Lebanon or Sudan or Syria. How would we react to real war? Not war that's removed, not war that we engage with on the internet or on the nightly newscast. Sharunian has shown up. Good to see you, and I appreciated you wishing me a happy new year, both in a comment and in the email. Sorry, I didn't reply to the email, but I did get it. Thanks very much, and a happy new year to everyone else here. We are living in interesting times. I think that is part of the title of this live stream tonight, that we are living in interesting times. And they're getting more and more interesting by the day. And I have said this for a while, that I almost am in a fashion saying, come on, bring it. I almost feel like it's Chinese water torture, just little bit, little bit, little bit, little bit, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back, 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. We're moving in the direction of global conflict, but not in a straight line. And I almost feel that it is inevitable. And then Anna Monarchy is writing that he's saying, I was interested to learn a while ago, reading James Michener's semi-historical novel, Alaska, that Japan tried to invade Alaska. I wasn't even aware of that. I'll have to check it out. I've read Michener before. I read a book that he wrote called The Source, and he's also the author who wrote Hawaii. So, but I was unfamiliar with his historical novel, Alaska. Michener is said to be something of a writer of historical fiction. He takes real life world events and then he injects a novel, a fictional novel, into real life events. Gore Vidal is a similar type writer. Anyway, Alaska. Yeah, I think I'd have to look into it. I haven't read much on it, but I believe at varying times there were British claims, Russian claims to the territory, and possibly I know that the Panhandle, the Alaskan Panhandle, was disputed territory, and Canada laid claim to it, as did the United States, and then Britain came along and basically brokered an agreement, and they were the ones who more or less handed it to the Americans. And it was prior to World War One. And my recollection of the history is that the British were concerned about having American support for the looming First World War, and so it was they, rather than side with their Commonwealth nation Canada, they went against Canadian interests and ceded the territory to the United States to appease the Americans for support in the coming First World War. And Monarchy, an avid reader like myself, obviously, and has read more than I have, because Anne Monarchy's read Hawaii, I haven't read it. I've seen parts of the movie. It was made into a made-for-TV movie, and you're naming one that I'm unfamiliar with, Chesapeake, Chesapeake Bay. I'm not familiar with that one at all. And Monarchy saying also good, one of my favorite authors. I guess that might be in reference to Gore Vidal. I've read a couple of his books, but I know that my channel, I typically on Wednesdays, I of late in last year in 2025, I was trying to inject, a biblical message. And I think about Matthew 24. I think it's Matthew 24 about wars. Yes, it is. About wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes, etc. But do not worry that these are but the birth pangs. Um, and it strikes me, and has always struck me that you could take that passage and then zero in on any particular point of world history over the past, even 1,000 years, and there have always been earthquakes happening. There have always been wars happening. There have always been rumors of war happening. Nothing is different now. And it speaks to the fact that there's a cyclical nature to things. I've spoken before about the fact that you have end times theology. It's called eschatology. But there are two sides to eschatology. On the one side, there is the ultimate end. But then there are also frequently there are ends. Every major society, every empire, every dominating group. Yeah, it's interesting. Societies, empires, systems always think that they are invulnerable, that they're going to go on forever, but none of them do. None of them do last forever. There's always an end time. There was an end time for the people living under Roman occupation in first century Judea. In Roman occupied first century Judea, the Israeli people of that time, the Israelites, were living under the occupation of a foreign power. And then between 70 and 135 AD, roughly, there were major revolts that happened. The ultimate revolt came in 135 AD or right around there. It's called the Bar Kokhba Revolt. And roughly 500,000 Jewish Israelis were killed. Countless others were sent into slavery in Rome. And then you had the mass diaspora all around the world, Jews scattered to the four corners of the earth. And from that point forward, even while the Romans had been occupying Judea, it was still the Jewish national homeland. That's where the Jews were, that's where their temple was. But then in AD 70, I think under Emperor Tiberius, that's when the temple was destroyed. And then again, 135 AD, so just another 65 years after the destruction of the temple, then you had the mass expulsion of the Jewish people from their historical ancestral homeland and scattered to the four winds. And it was an end of their world. And then the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire imploded in on itself, and there was an end to that world. And then you had the rise of empire, and we have, the British Empire, French Empire, British, French, Spanish, Dutch Empire, the Russian Empire, Austrian Hungarian Empire, Prussian Empire, the Japanese Empire. You had all these empires in the world, all fighting against each other, especially as the world was being fully explored by these colonial powers and everyone was seizing their territory. The British were grabbing, they took control of India and down, in Oceania, they took control of New Zealand, of Australia. And the Spanish were seizing control of large parts of Central and South America and even parts of the North American continent. The French had their outposts in North America and in the Caribbean and in India. The Dutch were in Indonesia. The Dutch had their holding in New Amsterdam, New York City. Everyone fighting over control dominance of the planet. But then by the early 20th century, it's largely been carved up. And these wars have been going on forever. Spanish American War, the Hundred Years' War, the 7 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. And World War One was almost like a final dance. Let's go. Let's have a war to end all wars. Because it should be remembered that the First World War, when it happened, wasn't called the First World War because there hadn't been a second yet. It didn't start to be called the First World War until the Second World War came along to distinguish major global conflict. When it was going on, they called it the Great War or the War to End All Wars. But the name that I think is most fitting is it was called the End of Empire. This is the end of empire. And we transitioned from the age of empire, Prussian, Austrian, Hungarian, British, French, to the rise of the nation state. And we became, that's kind of the world we're still living in now. I do not identify as a subject of the British Empire, even though I am technically still a subject of King Charles. Anyway, uh, let's see what's being written. Seen a few new one. Danny's talking Bible time. Woohoo! Danny has always been the one suggesting to me that Wednesday night should be fixated on biblical teaching. And I will get back to talking about Matthew 24 and about the cyclical nature versus an ultimate end time. But um, so Anne Monarchy is telling me that Chesapeake is a Michener novel too. I did assume as much. And Nancy is here from Montreal. Both Nancy and Danny are moderators on the stream. Haven't had any problems for a while lately, but who knows? It'll probably happen again. Depends on what I talk about. Not talking about anything too contentious tonight. Might do a stream where I talk about the fact that there are two genders and bite me, or if you want me to believe in an endless number of genders, forget it. Then maybe some will show up. Who knows? But at any rate, don't worry about being late, Nancy. Pas de trouble. No trouble. And Danny and Nancy are both Montrealaises. They're both from Montreal, Canada, Montreal, Quebec, where in that province there's one official language, la langue française. And but don't worry, this stream is almost 99.9% of the time it's English. I do the odd French video, but my French is really dropping. I don't speak it enough. But just getting back to, and I'm going to probably wrap it up at this point, just talking about the fact the cyclical end time period. Are we coming to another cyclical end time, or are we coming to the ultimate end and the second coming of Jesus, and the second coming of Christ? I'm here to tell you point blank, I do not know. I do not know. I there's part of me that actually, yeah, I've gotten to a stage in my life. I'm going to be 60 this year, where I don't want to be living in interesting times. I'd rather be living in boring times. I would like to be living back in a world where I had trust in the political framework, in the authorities, in the medical establishment. I would like to get back to that, uh, largely because of where I am, where I'm at in my life. How much longer am I going to be around? Am I going to be around another 10, another 15, another 20 years? I don't know. I don't know. That's one thing that I think everyone has to recognize is that while yes, there are end times that are cyclical in nature, empires rise and fall, the Russian Empire rose and fell, the Roman Empire rose and fell, the Egyptian Empire rose and fell, the Byzantine, the Ottomans, they all rise and fall. And woe to you has to live during that period when The old is going away and something new is coming in because transitionary times, revolutionary times are not pleasant typically because the old order is being taken away and a new order is being established. And if that's to happen, you almost would want it to happen when you're young and vigorous and full of energy and ready to take it on. As you get older, you just want to slide, you know, you just want to be comfortable. You just want peace. And anyway, what's Animanarchy writing? Male washrooms in Toronto. Libraries have female hygiene. Oh, insane world. You know, the male washrooms now have, you know, tampons for sale. It's ridiculous. It's moronic. And Nancy is saying that boring is good. But how do you live? You know, a challenge that I'm having right now, and you could call it spiritual, you could call it mental health, if you want, put it under that rubric, is looking at the world in which we live and the power structures that are in place and realizing that I have no trust, no trust in them at all. And whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't say I was completely trusting, but there was a large degree of trust, and that trust has been eroded. And I wonder to what degree is that, am I being programmed? Am I being propagandized by, say, the Chinese, by enemies of the Western world to be distrustful of my own, you know, the powers that be within my, in my own country? Open question. I don't have an answer. Um, Danny's writing that normalcy, that it's out the window. And Monarchy is writing, not even for sale, they're unlimited free. Oh, great. That's with respect to tampons, in washrooms, in male washrooms, for so that men cannot menstruate, they can have free tampons. There are so many challenges in this world today. And, I look at this transgender stuff and the insane things it results in, like tampons in guys' washrooms. And we're focusing in on that. Well, there are far bigger issues out there, but it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that taxpayer money is going to fund tampons for guys, because some guys cannot deal with the fact that they are a guy and that they think they should have been born a woman and that they should be menstruating getting a monthly period. And so they pretend. Unbelievable. Uh, Danny's writing, it took me, Trudeau, to say that finally. I don't trust the government at all. Yeah. But the COVID period is what did it with me. The COVID period was the straw that broke the camel's back, and probably the most disconcerting thing of the entire COVID era is the degree to which people went along and enthusiastically went along. And that scared me. And it scared me that it worries me, it bothers me that you can't even make the natural and logical connection between what happened during the COVID era and the 1930s, 40s Germany when the Nazis were running it. If you make that comparison, you lose the room, because the people who went along with everything will tell you that's going too far, that you've taken things to an extreme, that that could never happen again. And the reason they say that is because their self-image of themselves is, well, I am a good person. And so I am incapable of doing what the German people did under Nazi rule. I cannot be propagandized the way those Germans were because I'm a good person. Those Germans were bad people. And they don't recognize that the Germans living in Germany, the Germans living under Nazi rule in the 1930s and 40s, were no different from the people living in Canada when COVID was going along. And the Germans, they thought they were good people too, and they thought going along and doing what they were told and buying into all the propaganda that that was the sane, rational, wise, best thing to do. It was good. And the people who went along with all the COVID stuff and hated on anyone. I had a no lockdown sign on my lawn that drew remarks from people. Oh, you're that guy with that no lockdown sign. Oh, I'm not going along. I'm a Jew in 1930s Germany wearing a yellow star on my arm by daring to go against the prevailing narrative that was being imposed on everyone. And the climax was when it came to the vaccine passport, when individuals such as myself were told, well, you're not allowed to work where you work anymore, and you can't travel, and you can't go into a restaurant, you can't be a fully functioning member of society unless you're willing to inject yourself with an unapproved pharmaceutical product where it hasn't even completed the trial, but we're authorizing its use anyway because it's an emergency. And unless you're willing to take this unapproved product and have it injected into your body, then you're not going to be allowed to work, travel, participate, function in society. And the majority of the population went along with it. And that's something I find incredibly disconcerting. There were two women. I was at work this past week. I went into a coffee shop. As I went in, there were two older women, probably kicking somewhere around 80 years of age, about 20 years older than myself. And these are two women with whom I used to go to church. When I moved to Brighton, Ontario in 2015, I started going to the United Church of Canada, Trinity St. Andrews, here in town. And I started to attend that church, and I actually attended that church for about 3 years. So I got to know people, and these two women, I won't name them, but they, I got to know them, and they greeted me. How are you? How? And they always ask, how's your wife? How's your youngest? Hey, Betty's getting big now. All the niceties and all the normal things you say. However, I also know that the church they continue to attend. They've told me that during the vaccine passport period, if you wanted to go to worship service, they required you to show proof of vaccination. And that is disgusting, horrible. That's Gestapo style governance. But the United Church of Canada went along with it. That congregation and most United churches went along with it. They bought into the bogus, what was being promoted as following the science, which was non-science. In 2021, Pfizer and Moderna destroyed their placebo groups. I've talked about it on here before. I wasn't even aware when it happened. In January, February of 2021, Pfizer and Moderna unblinded their trials. And then to everyone who had been offered, who had been given the placebo, the saline based placebo, they then offered them the mRNA. And according to an article in NPR, which talked about a clinical trial site in Kansas, 650 people out of all the people who got the placebo, only two continued on placebo. Only two refused to get the mRNA. So if there were 650 trial participants in that location, that would be roughly 325 dosed mRNA, 325 on placebo. And then they unblind the trial and they say to the 325, you did not get mRNA. You were given the placebo. Would you like the mRNA? And according to the article, only quote unquote only a couple, which I take to mean two, maybe three, but a couple is obviously two. Only two or a couple opted not to get the mRNA. Now, that makes sense to me because individuals who volunteer to go into a clinical trial are often hoping they will get the pharmaceutical product. They realize it's double blinded, so the investigator or the clinician doesn't know what they're injecting, saline or mRNA, and the person receiving it doesn't know, but they figure, oh, I've got a 50-50 shot. And obviously, likewise, these are people who follow the science, follow the pharmaceutical companies, follow the Anthony Fauci's, do as you're told. So it's not surprising to me at all in reading that NPR, National Public Radio, which is a progressive left-wing publication. It's come under fire with the Trump administration. They've removed funding from NPR, which has caused the Democrats and the liberal progressive left to get all upset. How can you take away money from NPR? I like reading, if I'm going to be reading about something like destroying the placebo group, I like reading it from that angle as opposed to reading it from a more right-wing conservative perspective. It's like, anyway, I like to see things from all sides. At any rate, I wasn't even aware of that fact. And what that means is that because the placebo groups were destroyed, that would suggest 99% of the people who got placebo, that they opted to get the mRNA. And what that means is that later, a year down the line, 6 months down the line, you want to find out, okay, what is the incidence of stroke in people who got the mRNA? And let's say it's 12 per 100. 12 people per 100 mRNA dose people suffered a stroke of one description or another. Okay, then you would look at the rate in the placebo group and say, okay, how many strokes are we seeing in the placebo group? And if there's 12 per 100 in the dosed arm and in the placebo arm, that's a pretty strong indication that the mRNA is not causing an increased level of strokes, or that, there's no correlation at all. So you don't even have to worry about potential causation. But what happened is by destroying the placebo group, they can look at the dose group and say, well, we had 12 per 100 in the 12 per 100 based on 49,500 people. 12 per 100 had a stroke. Okay, what's in the placebo group? Well, the placebo group, we only have 500 people in it. We can't make a meaningful comparison. And so what they can ultimately say from that then is they can honestly say that there is no evidence suggesting that there's an increased risk of stroke from the mRNA vaccines. There's no evidence of it because they don't compare. Well, no, we destroyed the evidence. We destroyed the placebo group. So we don't have any means by which we can determine. So the reason there's no evidence is they destroyed the ability to collect the evidence. And no one's aware of these facts. I wasn't even aware when it happened. I didn't know they were destroying the placebo group in January, February, that they were giving the mRNA to the people. And then what do you hear from those who push the vaccines? The COVID vaccine trial, followed the gold standard, double blind, placebo controlled. Well, yeah, but only for a few months. And then they destroyed the placebo group. Oh, you didn't mention that. You don't tell us that part. Yes, they're not lying when they say that the Moderna and the Pfizer trials had a large placebo group, 50-50. Yes, had, but January, February of 2021, they eliminated, destroyed the placebo group. And yet they want us to believe that, we followed rigorous standard, gold standard protocols. Insane. And now they want us to have trust in the broader system. It's crazy the world we live in. Uh, anyway, I'm just going to catch up and then I'm going to wish everyone a good night. Uh, I'm going to, Danny's writing with respect to the whole tampon in the male washrooms debate. He's saying the thing is, some guys are pussies, but they don't own one, they don't have one. That's a little off color, but I'm going to obviously let it go. Anarchy liked it. Uh, Anarchy's writing, I had no lockdown sign on the edge of the property where I had a room at the time, and some clown took it away. I had the back window of my van, went out to the car, and it had been smashed. Now, had that happened, did that happen organically? Was a truck going down our street and kicked up a rock or something? I don't know. But I tend to suspect it might have been vandalism. I don't have proof of it, though. I think it could have been. Uh, and then let's see, Amonarchy wrote, must have been what I call a jabroni. Okay. And then Amonarchy, this is interesting. I was listening to someone's take on antidepressant trials, talking about how some people in them that got side effects from the drug actually feel happier because of those side effects, because then they know they got the so-called medicine and think that it must be working. Yeah, I'm putting on weight, so obviously I'm getting, and what I've heard, if you talk about things like antidepressants, um, there are chemical reactions. I don't understand this stuff. I'm not offering medical advice, blah, 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 blah. But as I understand it, there are chemical reactions that take place in the brain, and they can lead to depression, uh, lack of appetite, lack of motivation, blah, blah, blah. We all know, at least some of the symptoms of depression. And what antidepressants can do, as I understand it, is that they can alter the chemical makeup of the brain, and I guess give you endorphins, dopamine, and things like that to make you happy. But do the question I have is then, does an individual to avoid depression become totally dependent on this medication? I've heard anecdotal stories and podcast type interviews of people saying that unless they take their medication now, they get depressed. And it seems to be one of these cases where we treat a symptom but not the cause. What is the reason behind someone's depression? And that can be long and involved. It can involve psychoanalysis, it can involve therapy, and it's a long, drawn out process. Far easier to just take a pill. Can't sleep, take a pill. Depressed, take a pill. Overweight, take a pill. Having trouble functioning in the bedroom, take a pill. Take a pill, take a pill, take a pill, take a pill. And I know people who take handfuls of medication daily. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Big money for the industrial medical complex. An unhealthy population, fuels their bottom line. But it also leads, look at the world that we live in now. A lot of is being made over the fact that RFK Jr. is turning the food pyramid upside down and encouraging people to eat steak again and eggs and cholesterol and things of this nature. And I look at the health of society writ large. We've all probably seen, there's a picture that floats around on the internet, on social media, where it shows you the picture of a beach or a lake like setting in the 1970s. And it says, 1973, whatever year, pick a year in the 1970s, no obesity, no, everyone walking around healthy. And then contrast that with today. We are so unhealthy today. And what has changed? What has changed? We get crap load more in, the childhood vaccine schedule is through the roof. Our diets are garbage. And we've got an incredibly unhealthy population. But anyway, Anarchy goes on to say, so the harmful effects of the drugs themselves have a placebo effect on them. Very good. Danny's is of the opinion, and I agree with him. Most, or at least a lot, of the things that people take pills for, Danny's of the opinion, and I agree with him, that a lot of times they can be treated through dietary changes, lifestyle changes. And then he goes on to say that we've been eating this food pyramid that the U.S. Health Administration had. He's saying it's been upside down for years. And then he goes on to say that getting people off of oils, and I mean all oils, olive oil included, okay, and back to animal fats will be great start for health, in Danny's opinion. And I know he's spoken about this before. And there's a tendency, at least, from my perspective, you see the word vegetable oil and you think, okay, well, it comes from vegetables, it must be good. Canola oil, canola sounds healthy. Sounds like wheat germ, sounds healthy. So, and it's from a plant, so it's got to be good. But Danny has encouraged me, and I would encourage anyone to read up on canola oil and its original uses. Apparently, originally canola oil was created as a lubricant, not for dietary reasons. And Nancy's is writing, that's Eat Me 18. The food pyramid was created by industries lobbying the U.S. government. At any rate, I've been going on for nearly an hour. Appreciate everyone coming out. Nancy, Danny, Anna Monarchy. And I think that covers, and Sharunian was here. Good having you all back. Got to get back into the rhythm. It's going to take me a while to get back, rolling again. I hate the winter. It's a depressing time of year. Not enough sunlight. And the weather's been lousy in my little corner of southeastern Ontario. This past week, we had probably 10, 20 centimeters of snow, call it 15. Had a big dumping of snow. Then we got hit by freezing rain. The big guy, he got Monday, Tuesday, and he's had 3 days off in a row. His first 3 days back at school, they've canceled the buses all 3 days. And when they do that, the school is basically might as well be closed. All they do, kids who do show up, who walk or get driven to school, because half the classrooms are empty, is they play games and they just do fun stuff. There's no learning going on. And then Nancy's writing that canola oil sounds healthier than its other name, rapeseed. Yikes. Um, and then Danny writes that Nazi knocks on your door. Uh, Knock, knock, joke answer. So knock, knock, who's there? Nazis. Tisk, tisk, Gordon. We will be asking the questions, yeah? Knock, knock, who's there? Nazi, Nazi who? We will be asking the questions here. I think that's the way I hadn't heard that one before. Uh, at any rate, Danny's putting Jesus is and the crown. I was going to wrap it up talking about the fact that, yeah, there's cyclical end times and there's the ultimate end time. Are we entering a cyclical end time or are we heading to the ultimate end time? Are we coming up to the second coming? I don't have an opinion one way or the other. But what I will say is this: we all come to our own, everyone has an ultimate end time. We're all going to be coming to judgment at some point. We're all going to be standing before our maker. And uh, and at that point, you know, and we're seeking entry into eternal joy, bliss, happiness, heaven. And we're asked, but what did you do to justify entry? I know my answer is I did nothing, but because of him, because what he did, because of his sacrifice on that cross, I can be reconciled to a perfect and holy, righteous God. So I'll leave it there. Uh, Everyone's saying good night. I'll wish a good night as well. And Nancy's writing that my back sees bad, that her mom slipped on ice and fractured her right arms. Oh, pray that Montreal is rough in the winter. At any rate, we'll see you all again soon. If not in the interim, by no later than Saturday, I should be doing a live. So God bless everyone, and we'll see you again. If you made it to the end and you haven't hit subscribe at this point, I invite you to subscribe to the channel. I'm kind of in a hover period, but I'm sure something will come along and blow up at some point. So, anyway, we'll talk soon. Good night and God bless.